my whole immersion in technology has been guided from the beginning by Carver Mead. I was thrashing around as the writer of the Rosen electronic letter and making ghastly misjudgments and errors because I was a celebrity writer of the Rosen Electronics letter as the author of Wealth and Poverty, not as a knowledgeable person in microchips. And I met Carver in a hotel near the Newark airport, and we were going to have a short meeting. And I'd seen his book on all in the very limited bookcases and the CEOs of all the semiconductor companies. And I'd ask them about it, and they'd sort of get a little bashful. But I've read it, and it changed my life. And Carver has been my guide ever since. And he now is going to tell us about the nature of reality. He is.
Thanks, George. We've heard a lot of interesting things today. And one of the things that struck me is Kathy just said she had very carefully looked at innovation and creation of real value, and nobody could see it. So she's kind of going it alone, giving it away, hoping that people will wake up a little bit. This morning we heard a couple of very wise, very far-sighted people that basically said, AI is getting so good that it does quite a number of things that people do better than people do it. And so if you extrapolate that, it's going to do everything better than people do. And so we won't have to do much. And that will be nirvana. It struck me that this is symptomatic of a thing that's unfortunately happened in our culture, and that is not being able to see cause and effect. We heard that these machines, if they feed on their own stuff, after a while the whole thing collapses. So that's telling you something about how much innovation can possibly come out of them. I think AI is a great tool for human beings. But where did all of these ideas come from that these machines running these programs can do things better than people do, things in the real world? I mean, reality in an AI system is bits in a memory of a computation machine. In the real world, there are real atoms making real materials. There's real energy that is being put to use, for example, to power the computing machines. Those two spaces are totally different spaces. What the simulations do in the bits in a computer are changing voltages on physical transistors made of physical atoms, dissipating physical power in a world where power supplies have to come from energy generation. Those are different worlds. The simulation is not a part of physical reality. So how in the world could people confuse those two realities? Well, George's daughter Louisa is here today, and she wrote an incredible book called Age of Entanglement. And it was about the evolution of a theory that we now call quantum mechanics. And if you've read that wonderful book, it gets to a point and then makes it very clear that this is an unfinished theory. Now, how did that happen? Well, it happened because what we do when we have a concept of how reality works is we make a mathematical model of it. And then we can run the mathematical model on computers and see what it does. And that either compares well with what the physical world does, but it also suggests the next thing we might understand once we understand this one. Science has always worked that way, but very often it would get stuck. Like it took a couple of 100 years when people tried to understand what heat was. And it turns out that we all think of heat as the jiggling around of atoms due to temperature. That was not understood for 200 years, and people fought over it all that time. Finally, it got to a deeper understanding, and people moved on. That's the way science works. What happened in quantum mechanics is the people that were working on it were arguing about what it did and didn't explain about nature, what it did and did not suggest for experiments. And it got stuck. You could compute the energy of a hydrogen atom really well. But a helium atom has 2 electrons in it. And those 2 electrons, according to Schrödinger's theory at the time, those 2 electrons should go in the same state. And if you computed that state for a hydrogen atom, Schrödinger got the right answer. If you compute it for a helium answer, you're way off. What was that about? Well, there were 2 possibilities. One is there were things we didn't understand yet. The other one is there wasn't anything more to understand. Heisenberg, an incredibly bright, aggressive young man, cooked up an algorithm. That algorithm operated in 3n dimensional space, where n is the number of electrons. So the number of dimensions in the space grew factorially, faster than exponential. And furthermore, all it could compute were probabilities. It gave no idea of where those probabilities came from. Now, we use probabilities all the time in science to indicate things we can't keep track of. Too many atoms to keep track of them all, so we use things like pressure and temperature to indicate averages over large numbers. That's what statistics are about. But Heisenberg and Bohr took a much stronger stand. They said, no, beneath the statistics, there is nothing to be understood. Now, if you just think about that a while, you realize if that is true, that's the end of scientific method. If there's no cause and effect anymore, and all we have to do is look at that algorithm, and that's all we will ever understand, then the first question that comes up is, well, what is reality then? If the algorithm is all there is it distinguishable from reality? That was the beginning of a disease that so far has had no cure. And that disease is loss of the belief in cause and effect. Unfortunately, the theorists in physics have stuck to that party line, instead of admitting that there's another level there to be understood, like there always has been in science. They take the position, no, that's all there is, and we're the ones that own it. So that's why Peter Thiel calls this, the theoretical scientists the atheist church. It's become a religion, and they're the priests. That belief system shows up in the press all the time. Is what we see real, or are we all just in a simulation? You've all seen that. But the young people hear this, and when they ask questions, they either flunked out of the course or they just shut up and calculate, as the saying goes. A great deal of the social and cultural diseases we have in the United States are traceable to the inability of people to recognize cause and effect and reason about it. I don't want to stop there, and fortunately I don't have to. I would like to report to you that in the last 5 years or so, there's been an upwelling of interest from young people. What's really understand? What's really underneath those statistics? There's a lot of interest now in what is it that we don't understand, and the priests of the atheist church just wouldn't tell us that. So once again, we can look to the young people to dig down and figure it out. Thank you.